everyone, welcome to another episode of my daily dose of inspiration and positive affirmation. Today I have Christa, Carone with me.
Hello, good morning.
I'm so glad to have you here.
Nice to see you again.
Yes. Chris, for those who don't know, Christa is the president of Group 9 Media. Prior to that, she worked as the Chief Operating Officer at Group SJRO. She has also worked as CMO of Boston 2024 Olympics partnership. And you've also kind of held numerous leadership positions.
Yeah.
And I'm so pleased to have you here for this amazing discussion about the challenges and importance of women in power.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Christa, it's not secret that we have, we are born leaders, whether as daughters, as wives, as friends, as moms, it's who we are born to lead.
Right.
No offense to the men. But it's also no secret that the number of women compared to men in leadership is significantly low. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a ton of different theories about that. I have one thought in particular, and it also serves as a way to inspire women to be motivated for more senior level roles. I think over time women have opted out of the workplace, primarily because the workplace has not been a culture or an environment that felt safe or felt comfortable for them as they were trying to both manage a career and manage a family. So my concern is that we don't have enough women who stay in and kind of work through trying to grow up through the ranks so that we can have more women in leadership positions and that women are willing to take more risks in order to go into those senior level jobs. A lot of times those roles require a lot of courage. They require a lot of empathy. They require a tremendous amount of hard work. And those are all characteristics of incredibly strong women. We just have to be willing to stay in and be able to deal with all of the challenges. So when we have stronger numbers of women at all of the different ranks of career progression, I think that we're going to start to see some massive progress in women moving into the C-suite.
That's interesting, and I've done an episode on career women trying to balance their children, like having children and also kind of keeping their career going. And were there a number of women, trying to achieve this goal? Do you think the system is built to assist them do this while having children, having their home together, and also still striving to keep their career going and achieving leadership positions?
I think the system is getting so much better because there's more women moving into these roles where they can have influence over how we're building workplace cultures.
Yes.
So I was incredibly fortunate earlier in my career. I was the chief marketing officer for Xerox Corporation, but Xerox was run by female CEOs. Anne Mulcahy, one of the first female CEOs of a Fortune 200 company. And when she left the company, she handed the reins to Ursula Burns. So it was the first female to female transition of power. And what these women brought to the workplace was not, first of all, amazing leaders, regardless of their gender, stellar leaders, but also a sense of empathy of what it takes to be able to manage a hard-charging career while also living a very fulfilling and rewarding life. Yes. And they applied that empathy to how they led the business and how they led the culture. And I learned so much from that, and it really has informed my leadership. So the more I've been able to move into positions of some authority or some power, I try to use that sense of empowerment to help bring others along. So to be empathetic to everyone's situation and create a workplace where women are choosing to opt in and to grow their careers in really ambitious ways.
And again, that speaks to the point I made earlier where I said women are actually natural born leaders. Of course, whether you're a woman or a man, if you're a good leader, you're a good leader, but just that sense of empathy, knowing being a woman and having to deal with other things, you bring that to the leadership position, and that kind of helps.
Right.
The other question I want to ask you is, with the Me Too movement going on right now, it's kind of shed light on all of the kind of inequality that goes on in whether professional or otherwise with women in this society. But with someone like you that has a long-term leadership career,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that have always been the case. What are some of the challenges you had to face as a woman in power?
Yeah, so I have to say I've been very fortunate, and part of it is because I did spend a significant part of my career in a culture that valued not just diversity, but valued inclusion.
Yes.
And I grew up there, so it so was instilled in me that that was part of leadership and a requirement of leadership. So I don't take any of that for granted. I do, as I've moved into other industries, have certainly seen firsthand or experienced firsthand a bit more of that bias. My biggest concern often in those situations is the marginalization of women, because we tend not to have the loudest voice in the room, and when we do try to have the loudest voice, we're characterized as being overly aggressive. So I do think that as I've grown into these leadership roles, it's trying to shed some of those perceptions and the generalizations that almost have grown organically in workplaces, and try to shift those legacy perceptions.
Yes.
It's the way that I manage my team, of trying to embolden strong, ambitious women, and not putting labels.
Yes.
Not putting labels on men and not putting labels on women either. I think that the more we can shift the focus from diversity to inclusion, the more that we're going to be able to not just change the conversation, but really kind of change the game in terms of equality in the workplace.
Yes. I really appreciate your point on that. Like, it's not about diversity. Whoever you are as a person, it should be more of inclusion.
Yeah.
Let's bring all that in. Let's embrace whoever they are, look at the performance and the work, the quality of work, and work with that.
Yeah.
I have another question for you, and that has to do with like women empowering each other. You mentioned how important it was, or like the importance of just having a female leader then who brought empathy to the workplace, and how that impacted your leadership style. A colleague and I was discussing about the importance of women kind of lifting each other up. Of course, we want to avoid the gender bias, but at the same time, that's really important, because there is we don't have the numbers on our side,
Right.
but we also tend to want to stay with the number when it comes to certain situations. How do you think more leaders like yourself should empower that act of like supporting each other as women?
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, I think it's almost an obligation of
Yes.
ours, because I think about all of the amazing men and women who have
Yes.
supported me in my career. And I heard this wonderful quote once, I think it's Anna Quinlan, who said, as you rise up, make sure you reach down, and that you're bringing others along. And that has so defined my career. I mean, the number of women in particular who have been champions of mine at times where it really didn't make sense to, or giving me opportunities that I felt like I was over my skis on, but just kind of boosting me up with confidence,
Yes.
was massive. And that point of empathy really cannot be overstated, right? Because we've walked in each other's shoes, we can bring the perspective to the conversation, and we don't have the benefit of scale, right? We don't have the benefit of all of the numbers. So I think we have to be careful that we don't become too tribal and create
Yes.
our own girls' networks versus, and then be critical of the boys' networks,
Yes.
right? This gets back to the conversation around inclusion, is taking a look at who you're surrounding yourself with, and the opportunities that you're giving to people where you are somewhat gender blind, and just bringing the best people forward. I will tell you that one of the most important people in my career is a gentleman who was a chief financial officer of a company that I was working at, and he really became a sponsor to me. So less of a mentor
Yes.
and a sponsor, of somebody who saw something in me that I hadn't really seen myself, and was a vocal advocate of mine when I wasn't around, right? So it's also as important to be looking for sponsors, to be looking for those people who are going to be your cheerleaders,
Yes.
and making sure that you're appreciative of those relationships as well.
Yeah. I think this is a really good point for people like myself and a few others who are going to be watching this, how you build your network when you go into a professional career. Do you want to throw a few insights to those people? Like, how do you identify your sponsor and your mentors? And how can you build that relationship without it feeling like you're always asking, but more like letting that person know, I like you, I like your leadership style, and I want you to teach me what you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have mentors, and I am a mentor to a number of people. So it is this give and take, and there is this nice, as you rise up, reach down, and it just sort of like keeps the river flowing here. I think it's important to be super transparent if you're reaching out to someone saying, I'm inspired by your leadership and I'd love to learn more. And ask, if they have the time to be spending with you, and also be aware that they may say no, right? I think that more mentors need to be self-aware of how much time they can give and be honest with people as well if they're not able to invest the time and the resources. But also for you to be looking to people you can mentor as well. So it is like, constantly giving as you're receiving too.
Yes. Oh man, I really love that point. So it's not just you looking for mentor, but you also have to think of, at my stage, at the level I am right now, what can I give back to someone else,
And you've got interns coming into an office who, may be deer in the headlights and saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to navigate all of that? You identify those people and you kind of say, hey, want to go grab a cup of coffee? I know you've been here for a few weeks and your head is probably swirling. And people, we all remember being at that point in our career, and we would have been terrified to ask. Terrified. So I think sometimes it's identifying those points of vulnerability with other people and getting ahead of it and reaching out and almost offering that type of support even before you're being asked for.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How would you, given your years in leadership, how would you describe your leadership style? And is there anyone in particular? I know you've mentioned a few people that have impacted you that you can really remember, like, thank God I had this person in my life and it's changed how I think about leadership.
So I'm pretty transparent about this, that my leadership is defined by working for amazing leaders and not so amazing leaders. And I have learned as much from working for people who did not inspire me and saying, okay, what is it about this relationship right now where I don't feel like I'm giving 100%, right? And tucking that away and saying, I want to make sure that no one who works for me ever feels the same way. And so I kind of keep circling back to this point around empathy, because I really do think it defines so much of how we manage relationships in the world. But on any given day, my leadership is as influenced by the great people I've worked with and the not so great people I've worked with. And the situation of a not so great could be, well, I felt really marginalized under that particular supervisor. He or she just didn't bring me into key meetings, didn't give me an opportunity to kind of like show my stuff. And okay, so I need to be conscious of that in my next role of looking around to someone on my team who might have a point of influence and making sure he or she is always included. Just one example.
Yes. And I have another question for you.
Okay.
So there are like young professionals, mid-level leaders, and this is hypothetically, and probably they are in the challenge of like not knowing how to break through in the midst of like the leadership position they have. Their voice are not being heard, and they're women. And like you said, women have there's the tendency of being tagged as being aggressive when you want to have your voice. How would you recommend that such mid-level leaders handle such situation in a way they come out on top and still feel like their voice were heard and without the stigma of being that aggressive woman in the room?
Right. So male or female, it's about doing the work, right? Like, be an incredibly hard worker. Make sure that any points of view that you're delivering are informed points of view. Luck is more defined by a ton of effort. So I do always caution people, not really caution them, just remember that the quality of your work will help you move along,
Yes.
right? But also there's a bit of confidence that comes with that. So if you are a really solid contributor, you should feel very comfortable and confident that you can be expressing an informed point of view in those meetings. And if at the end of the day you just don't feel like you're breaking through, really, really difficult decision to make, but it may not be the right place for you, right? I think walking away from particular opportunities is the hardest thing in the world for any of us to do. And oftentimes we maybe stay too long. But yeah, that's just the one thing that I often will put out to folks. It's hard because we all need jobs, right?
Yes.
There is the financial piece of this that we don't like to talk about, but we should. But if you're increasingly in a situation where you feel incredibly confident that you're delivering the work, that you've demonstrated a propensity to learn, but you are not feeling valued, you've expressed to the people who you report to or in the organization how important feeling valued is, and a year later you're still feeling the same, then it's time to lift up your head.
Yes. There's always this fear of like, if I leave here, what's out there for me, and people want to stay in the situation that they're comfortable in, with that, like, instead of going out and kind of seeing what's out there and where
there's
they're
a lot
respected.
out there, and it's okay to have your head up even while you're still delivering 100% for the organization that you're with. But this analogy is used all the time, but it's proved to be very true to me, that your career is not a ladder, it's a jungle gym. So you have to be willing to take a step aside, maybe even take a little bit of a step down in order to leap forward, truly. And that has been, was something that I learned and had to very much embrace, and it has served me really well.
So I would personally say for myself, like, it's so difficult to want to take a step back. And sometimes it's what we need, you want to take a step back to analyze where you've been, because it helps you see clearer when you move forward, because you move at speed when you see clearer. But sometimes we want to just stay where we are because we feel like, oh, at least I'm here,
Exactly.
But sometimes it's good to take a step back.
Especially if you're going to a new industry and you do need to learn the industry, and it's an industry you're really passionate about, so there's going to be something that comes with that passion where you're going to just feel more fulfilled as a human being. There's something to that.
I've learned so much. I don't know about the listeners back home. I hope they've learned as much as I've learned from this conversation. First of all, you have to lead with empathy and inclusivity instead of diversity. Let's focus on the inclusion part of it. And as a leader, is whether you're a man or woman, always learn from whether it's your negative experience or your positive experience, because it teaches you how to kind of like advance and be a better leader.
Be the leader that you as an employee would want to be. You know what I mean? Like, think of yourself of, if this person is working for me, because ultimately great leadership inspires followership. Right? So every industry is basically a people industry. There's still people who are going to inform what you get done, and you want to inspire people to do great work and to be amazing contributors, and that's kind of how you move things along.
And we've talked about leaders. The last question I want to ask you are the aspiring leaders, like the young folks like myself, who wants to be people like you in a few years or 10 years.
You will
somewhere.
be. Yeah, for sure.
What would you leave us with, and how do you think we can use that leadership position when we eventually attain it to better the society? Because we all have a role to play in making the society a better place, right?
So one thing is opt in. Figure out ways to make a professional career an important part of your life, and stay with it, because there's going to be times where it's really, really hard, and it may be easier to opt out. But we need numbers of really great women in the workplace in order for more of us to move into the C-suite. And then second, I think try to define the attributes of leadership that are important to you, and then aspire to live those attributes. So for me, it's certainly empathy, it's courage, it's kindness, of just being in a position where people are nice to each other and say thank you and they're gracious, but it's also being bold and being willing to take great risks. So that's kind of how I look at how I define certain attributes of leadership, but I think everybody should figure out those profiles on
yes,
their
what
own.
works for you.
Yep.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so
Of
much,
course,
Christa, for
yeah.
taking that time from your
My
very busy
pleasure.
schedule
My pleasure.
to
It's
share
always
your
great seeing
wisdom
you.
with us, with me, and with the listeners. And I appreciate your time.
course.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.